Chapter 9, The Last Battle of the American Revolutionary War. Name the last battle of the American Revolutionary War. Surprisingly, many cannot. What would your answer be? Where did it take place? What generals were there? How long did it last? Everyone can answer the question, who won? Why, of course, we did. But what are your answers to the other questions? I'm pretty sure most of the responses would mention the Battle of Yorktown. That's what my husband Charlie said when I asked him. Some war aficionados could recite important details such as the siege of Yorktown started on September 28th, 1781 and ended October 18th, 1781. These war aficionados would also be able to talk about the Continental Army and how it was led by General George Washington with help from our French allies and forced British General Lord Charles Cornwallis into a situation where his army was compelled to concede defeat. Even more impressive would be if you could cite the name, place, and date of the signing of the treaty. This information, the Treaty of France, signed on September 3rd of 1783, was vaguely in the recesses of my brain. Nevertheless, the names of the American delegates present to negotiate with the British, Benjamin Franklin, John Jay, and John Adams, were not. Guessing their names might have emerged, but not sure. With the signing of the treaty on September 3rd, 1783, the American Revolutionary War officially ended. The above information is, of course, accurate. Still, the question remains, where was the last battle? And who was involved? Daniel Boone was there. Peter Adams was not. He could not procure a horse, and thus was not able to participate in the Battle of Blue Licks. Before we discuss this battle, the last of the Revolutionary War, let's discuss this phrase, not being able to procure a horse. Upon my first perusal of Peter Beechfork Adams's pension application, these words did not pop out nor cause me to contemplate their meaning. During the first reading, I was still in awe of Peter's activity in these tumultuous times and that he served under Clark and Boone. It was during the second scrutiny of this document that Peter's words penetrated my brain. I'm fairly sure not having a horse was a pioneer's worst nightmare. It was a necessity for everyday life. The phrase workhorse might have originated with the pioneers. For me, it signifies my existence. Let me walk you through my thinking. If Peter had procured a horse, then he would have been part of the body of troops, many who were later massacred by the British and Indians at the Battle of Blue Licks. Since he did not, he lived. Since he lived, so did Elisha Smith Adams, my third great-grandfather. Since Elisha lived, so did William Peter Adams, my second great-grandfather. Since William lived, so did John Harvey Adams, my great-grandfather. Since John Harvey lived, so did Ollie Obe Adams Pointer, my grandmother. Since Ollie lived, so did my dad, James Donald Pointer. Because my dad, Don to those who know him, lived, I live. No horse equals life in my world. No horse saves my genealogy thread, my daughters and my granddaughters. Devouring Peter's declaration gives me life. I think you can understand why. So there you have it. The last battle of the American Revolutionary War was the Battle of Blue Licks. At least some historians believe this to be true. Some insist that the distinction still goes to the Battle of Yorktown. That would have been my answer, if not for journeying into Peter's wartime service. After much reading on the matter, I've concluded that the Battle of Blue Licks wins this merit. I've come to this conclusion since many British officers were there, such as William Caldwell, Alexander McKee, Matthew Elliott, Simon and George Girty, as well as many Indian chiefs from multiple Indian tribes. In addition, at the bottom of the Battle Blue Licks monuments are these words. This last battle of the Revolution was fought between 182 Kentuckians commanded by Colonel John Todd on the American side and about 240 Indians and Canadians commanded by Captain William Caldwell on the British side. Obviously, the Kentucky Society Daughters of the American Revolution wanted there to be no doubt where the last battle was fought. Peter was ordered to Bryan Station near Lexington early in the year of 1782. He remained on guard and was part of the 3 day siege in August of 1782 by British and Indian warriors. His declaration states he remembers all the circumstances of the siege, which continued until the third day, when the enemy retreated, but he refrains from their detail as being unnecessary here. Peter may have thought it unnecessary to elaborate, but I wanted details. Evidently, the settlers had heard that the British and the Indians were coming moments right before their arrival. They did not however, have time to bring in their cattle, the crops, or some water. Securing the gates was all they had time to do. The British did not attack right away, instead decided to play a game of cat and mouse, not wanting to reveal their strength in numbers nor their position. The British waited for the opportune moment to attack. Meanwhile, the settlers inside the fort needed water desperately. To keep from alerting the enemy as to the knowledge of their existence, they asked all of the women to travel outside the fort to a nearby spring in search of water. First, the women prayed before leaving, then left chatting amongst themselves to make appearances seem as normal as possible, as if this was just an ordinary day seeking a necessary nutrient of life. Once this task was accomplished and they were safely inside the fort, the gates were closed. These brave women may have saved the day. Water was running low and desperately needed during the siege. Now the men and women could go about protecting the fort. In fact, there is a monument established at Bryan Station dedicated to these brave women. The Lexington chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution were instrumental in honoring these 12 women and 16 misses for their bravery. There were no cowards inside Bryan Station during this time. Finally, the enemy attacked. After 2 days of fierce fighting and the inability to capture the fort, the enemy realized the barricaded settlers were not going to surrender. Therefore, they retreated. The pioneers, around 182 men, swiftly pursued their foe. It's unfortunate. Around 500 additional reinforcements were on their way. If they had waited, the bloodshed at Blue Licks could have been averted or drastically reduced. During the battle, Daniel Boone's son Israel was killed. Many men lost their lives that day. The British and Indians were well hidden in the ravines. The pioneers basically walked into a trap. Such a shame, especially since previously being able to defend their fort. Such a shame since many reinforcements were on their way. When I read these accounts, I couldn't believe Daniel Boone had lost not one, but two children to Indian warfare. When the men, Peter B.F. included, went out to retrieve the dead bodies, they found many of these bodies had been mutilated. This massacre had to be difficult for those who survived. Thankfully, many settlers were able to escape. In fact, you can find monument of the soldiers who died and those who escaped at the current Blue Licks Battlefield State Resort Park off of Maysville Road in Carlisle, Kentucky. These monuments were dedicated on March 14, 1935 by the Kentucky Society Daughters of the American Revolution. On the monument titled Privates Who Escaped, I found the name Jacob Hunter. Could this be Peter's uncle? In researching the same Southern Campaign pension website, I discovered Jacob Hunter's pension statement declared that he was, in fact, in the Battle of Blue Licks. After listening to this chapter, I wonder, what would your answer be to my original question?